You know, I get it. Hello and welcome to part 2. If you watched part 1, thank you. If you have not watched part 1 of this All for the Game series, go and do that now. Otherwise this video won't make any sense. Unless you read the books and you just don't like book 1. But yes, let's get started. Okay, so I'm talking about book 2 of the All for the Game series, The Raven King, in this video. Just a recap. Neil or just like the concept of the books. Neil is on the run from his father's gang, and after his mother dies, he decides to take a chance playing for a collegiate XC team, Palmetto Foxes. He has the protection of Andrew, one of the goalies on the team. He's the team's psychotic goalie in exchange for remaining on the team with Kevin. That's Andrew's part of the deal, is that Neil will stay by Kevin's side. Who is also like involved in this whole mafia thing, but Kevin doesn't know that Neil is like also part of this mafia thing. So, and last time I forgot to mention the tattoo thing, which is like pretty significant. The tattoo thing. So Rico, remember, like he thinks he's like the best. He's like gonna play on the US court, which is like the national team. And so Rico has a tattoo of a number 1 on his cheek. Kevin has a number 2 on his cheek, and John, our buddy John on the Ravens, has a number 3. So that is important because it's like they're the 1, 2, 3 best players in the US, in the world probably in Rico's eyes. And then just as like a reminder, I'm gonna put up the trigger warnings here. They're the same from the first book, but they're definitely hit a little harder in this one. And I'll do like a kind of pre-warning when we come up to those parts in the book. I'm not gonna discuss those parts necessarily in detail, but they like will be mentioned. So, and I have some like further commentary on the level of violence and trauma in these books towards the end as well, that I will talk about. Anything else? Nope, let's get started. So we open 1 week after the start of the academic year. School has black streamers because we're immediately following the death of Seth. That was the last thing that happened in the last book, or in the first book. So Neil's like main focuses are staying alive, playing XC. That's it. Everyone's going to practice except Andrew is going to therapy on Wednesday, and Allison is not going to practice because Allison was like sort of dating Seth. So the team has also been separated. Kevin and the gang are at the dorms. Allison's group is at Abby's. And Neil has been at YMAX. Neil loves to crash at YMAX. He sleeps more at YMAX than he does in the dorms, I think, like the first semester. So anyway. Seth's mom doesn't come to collect Seth's ashes. Allison has them. Neil is like low-key feeling really guilty about Seth's death, so is avoiding Allison. Neil is feeling guilty because he thinks Seth's death was caused by Rico. I mean, they pretty much know Seth's death was caused by Rico, and in retaliation for like Neil's little stunt on the Kathy Ferdinand show. So Neil's feeling really guilty about that. And Neil's just like worrying about like the team and keeping peace on the team and like all that. YMAC is like, don't come to me if you're sad. Go to Abby and B. So that's a lot of like fun masculinity. Yeah, tensions are high on the team. Then YMAC gets this phone call, and it's from this guy named Phil Higgins, or as Andrew calls him, Pig, because he's a police officer from Oakland, where Andrew was raised. Andrew will like take the phone from YMAC and then just like hangs up, and then Higgins calls back. Andrew will like have a snippy conversation with him and then like hangs up again. So like Andrew doesn't want to deal with this phone call. Mac's like, why are the police calling for you? Like, because this could be bad. Like, if Andrew has like some kind of charge in California, then like they won't have enough players for the team. So that would be a problem. Andrew storms off. He says he's sick and can't practice, and Kevin's like, that's not true. And Andrew's like, fuck your stupid game, and leaves. So Andrew leaves, and then Aaron says that Higgins is the one who told him about Andrew. Like, he's the one who reunited them because they were separated at birth. Okay, we'll talk more about that later, obviously. Aaron goes off alone. Renee and Andrew leave together once everybody gets back to the dorms. Neil and the upperclassmen return to the dorm for the first time since Seth's death, and everyone who's there does like a little debrief about the twins in Neil and Matt's room. So that's then Neil, Matt, Dan, Allison, Renee, no, not Renee, sorry, Kevin, Neil, Matt, Dan, Allison, Nikki. They all get together and are in Matt and Neil's room having this little debrief about these two. So they also share pizza and watch a movie, so it's so fun. Team bonding. Okay, so basically their mom went on to a football game, and Phil Higgins saw Aaron, thought Aaron was Andrew, and realized that Aaron was Andrew's twin, and he thought that Aaron's mom was his foster mom. She's actually his biological mom. And tried to reunite the twins. So Andrew's foster mom called Aaron's mom to set up for the twins to meet. Aaron's mom refused, but Aaron was on the phone call in the upstairs. That used to be a thing you could do, get on the phone line. If you had more than one home phone in the house, you would be able to get on the phone line and listen to a call. So anyway, Aaron listened to the call and heard about this. So he figured it out and tried to meet with Andrew anyway. And Andrew was like, fuck you, go away. So, and then Andrew went to juvie and Aaron moved to Columbia. So they did not meet until 3 years later, or several years later, when Andrew got out of juvie. So the twins have only known each other for 3 years total. So that's why they're not super close. So then after Nikki and Kevin leave, Dan and Matt are this is an opportunity for us to unite the team. Neil, you gotta be the one who has a foot in each camp. Neil, you have to do this. You have to make us all be friends. I feel sort of previously Nikki's kind of done that. Nikki has liaised. Nikki has sort of been wanting to be friends with them, or at least he'll talk to them. So, but Nikki's kind of he's not strong enough. He doesn't have any authority over the rest of that group. So he's not really a uniting force. And then obviously Renee is sort of friends with Andrew, but she's not friends with any of the other of them. There's a little Neil academics pause where Neil's taking 6 classes and Dan and Matt are what the fuck are you doing? You don't need to be taking this many classes because you're on a 5-year graduation track. And they do this rescheduling Neil's classes, and Neil does some dropping some classes, and there's an ad drop deadline or whatever in the registrar's website. So that's fun and also meaningless. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Renee comes back and is kind of beaten up a little, and she explains that she and Andrew are sparring partners, so that's fun. They are kind of unified as an Exy team, but they feel guilty that they are better now that Seth is dead, because Seth was a major problem for them playing wise. He wasn't a team player. So they feel guilty that they're better now with Seth out of the picture. Okay, so then our first game. I'm not gonna cut out to the game thing because I feel I don't need that. Plus it's it's easier to point to the people, because there's more in this book. I feel there's more discussions during the half times that I need this space for. So anyway, okay, Allison comes to the stadium before their next game. So I guess maybe she was, I can't remember now whether she was at the, like, she must have been anyway. So Allison is at the stadium before their next game. Nikki says she's like a well-dressed zombie. She's despondent. The starting lineup, so we have Andrew, Matt, Nikki, Allison, and Kevin, and Neil. Aaron's gonna go in for Nikki, Dan is gonna go in for Kevin, and Renee will go in for Allison. So the way we're coping with Seth is having Renee play as a backliner, and Andrew's gonna have to play a full game. So that's kind of tough. So because the second half lineup is then Andrew, Aaron, Nikki, Allison, Kevin, Dan, and then subs Matt for Nikki, Neil for Dan, and Renee for Allison. So that means that Andrew has to play both halves, which kind of screws up his whole medicine thing. So basically, they're screwed, and everyone on the team thinks so. So Neil, like Matt is assigned to get the XC rackets with YMAC, but Neil like trades them for it. Then there's like a lot of commentary about how XC rackets are and how they're designed, and I literally could care less. Like I'm reading for the drama, and the sports-related drama is good, but the sports-related sports, the equipment, I don't care. Could care less. Couldn't care less, I should say. Neil asks Wymack about Andrew, like how he got Andrew to agree to play. Wymack says he knows Andrew doesn't like him, but that Andrew also knows that Wymack could be way stricter about like drugs and stuff, and so, but isn't, and so Andrew's like willing to give him what he needs, which is playing both halves of the game, because he knows Wymack could be like a hard ass about other stuff. So on the bus, Neil sits with the monsters, and also Wymack and Abby take turns driving the bus, which at first I was like, that's crazy. Like, they wouldn't do that. But then Wymack says it's because he doesn't trust anyone, like they could afford it, but he doesn't trust anyone to drive them, which does make sense given the issues that they face. But it's still ridiculous. Neil mentioned, so when they get to Nashville, they go to Belmont, and the game's in Nashville, so they're going from South Carolina to Tennessee, which means they cross a time zone. And Neil mentions choosing not to change the time on his watch, and then he just takes it off, which I don't know, I feel like this is like kind of a weird inclusion. Like, I feel like, you know, if you're gonna include something about a character, it should be meaningful. And I'm not sure what to make of this. Like, does it mean he just doesn't really care, like, what time is? He doesn't like making unnecessary efforts. He, like, I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing that, like, I'm not really sure what it's trying to tell us about his character. So Neil has to change in the bathroom for his top half because the locker room's not private. He notices they also don't have private stalls in the showers, which is going to be a problem for him later. Andrew and Neil briefly bicker about Neil's ability to continue to avoid Allison. Neil asks for advice from Kevin, and Kevin like actually gives him solid advice. He's like, don't score right away, like we're gonna kind of like make them underestimate us, and then like once you come back in the second half, like you can score, because this is XC and Kevin does not fuck around when it comes to XC, so he actually gives Neil some solid advice. Neil also asks Kevin if he thinks Andrew's gonna be able to make it through both halves. Neil and Kevin are both like, yeah, it's not gonna work out. But Andrew seems good, but it might just be like still like glassing high or whatever. And then they've circled up before the game. There's a brief mention of Caitlin. Matt says she'd beat Aaron's girlfriend if he asked her out. Andrew says to Aaron in German, maybe he's afraid she'll die on him like the last woman he really loved. Foreshadowing. The amount of like comments in this book that don't make sense initially and then come back around to make sense, like get explained later, is kind of a lot. They just love the drama. Okay, they all walk onto the court. Neil's like super worried about Andrew. The refs lock them in. That's one of the things about this sport. They're locked in. locked into the court. Okay. Neil follows Kevin's advice not to score unless he gets a really good opportunity. Neil's backliner who's guarding him keeps making like really snide comments about his ability to play. So the Foxes, I think, they're kind of like, their strategy has been sort of to play the long game, counting on other teams to underestimate them before like actually showing their cards. So when Kevin goes out in the first half, he tells Neil to go for it. Neil does this like kind of duck and swerve under Herrera, his backliner, and like pops the ball from his net, scoops it up, and then like Herrera, instead of running into Neil, runs into the wall and like hurts himself. Neil runs for the goal and scores, and so at the half they're tied 4-4. And everybody's like, Neil, don't, that was risky and you could have gotten hurt, don't do that. But Neil doesn't care about injuries. So. Halftime. Neil is just staring at Andrew in the circle. So everyone else is like having conversations, talking about plays, whatever. Neil and Andrew are just like having a stare off. Because, you know, Neil loves to look at Andrew. Neil says then, like, out of the blue, stop it, to Andrew. So everybody else stops talking because it's like, what the hell is this? Andrew says, I'm not doing anything. Neil says, exactly, because I guess in Neil's mind, he's talking about Andrew, like, not playing, like, not trying to play. But that doesn't really translate. So that's fun and awkward for everybody. Wymack comes in and tells them that they need to do a better job of creating point gaps in the first half. So basically he's like, I'm tired of this long game shit. Like, we're not gonna make it if you guys do this. We need to like actually like score as much as we can in the beginning because we can't be fresh in the second half because we all have to play like pretty much full games. Abby asks Neil how he's doing like the shoulder injury from his duck and roll move. Neil says I'm fine. Nikki thanks him because that means Nikki's just won a bet. Because it's a great bet to bet on Neil saying I'm fine. Kevin yells at him for not taking injuries seriously, tells him to stop saying he's fine. Wymack says some people are just hardwired to be stupid. Okay, so second half. So Neil observes his teammates. He's off initially, so he's just observing them. He thinks Matt's the best player on the team. Roommate solidarity. Matt is the best player on the team, and he's also the best person in the book, so go Matt. I'm on team Matt. Neil plays with desperation because he knows one day he'll have to leave XC forever. Matt has an altercation with another player. Renee gets Matt off of him, but they all three get yellow cards. The other team tries to tie it back before the end, but Andrew blocks it. Like, it's like seconds. There's seconds to tying it back up, and there's seconds left in the game. And the player takes a shot, and Andrew like moves before the shot's even left the stick, or the racket, sorry. Andrew is able to block it, and the Foxes win. Happiness is short-lived though, because Andrew's about to lose it due to the withdrawal. So Neil and Kevin go to the goal. Kevin like mimes having a conversation with Andrew so that it doesn't look like Andrew's like really freaking out. And all the rest of the team like crowds around Andrew to kind of like protect him from, everybody's looking at him. So post-game, Dan and Renee take the showers first so that Neil can shower in the girls' bathroom, or in the girls' locker room by himself. So that's sweet. Neil is like shocked that anyone would ever be concerned for him. Neil's shocked to discover that like anyone cares, so. After the shower, Neil goes to the nurse's room and finds Wymack and Andrew. Andrew's like sprawled out on the floor, like surrounded by pills and alcohol. So that's fun. Wymack's really an enabler, I think, but that's neither here nor there. He could be worse. Neil asks Wymack why he added shower stalls. Wymack says maybe he knew someday Neil would need them. Andrew calls Neil a walking tragedy. Andrew tells Wymack he'll be staying with him for the next few days to avoid Kevin, and then leaves. Neil stops him and asks how Andrew knew which direction to block that goal. Because Neil, if there's anything he's doing, it's thinking about Exie. Andrew says that Wymack told him how that player takes their penalty shots and knew that when he was under pressure to tie the game, he was bound to take that same kind of shot. And then Neil is kind of like amazed that Andrew would remember this detail and that Andrew was even paying attention in the first place. So yeah, everybody talks on the bus home and Neil has this like realization that he's happy, which is heartbreaking. Daily life start. Our first daily life section. All right. Neil thinks about how much money he has and how he's going to need to spend some of that money when he has to go on the run again, how he's going to need to get a new passport and British crime family that his mom's in and blah, blah, blah. So he's thinking about all this, and then it's like he's annoyed because the monsters have taken him shopping. He doesn't want to spend any of his money on clothes because he needs it for these other things. They want to get him something for the banquet. Neil doesn't even want to go to the banquet. The Ravens are going to be there. Gross. Neil's afraid of Rico, but Rico will know that if Neil doesn't show up. Aaron gives Neil a list of single vixens that he could possibly take to the banquet. Nikki complains that the list is all girls, which doesn't help them. Neil's like... Neil pushes back on this, but Nikki argues that Neil's never looked at Allison's tits, so he must be gay. Kevin then says, and this is one of my favorite moments of the book, Kevin tells Nikki to stop being a bad influence because it will be easier to make Neil court if he remains heterosexual. So just a clap for sports and being predictable and masculinity. Neil says it's fine for him to go alone because Kevin and Allison will also be going alone. Neil and Andrew have an argument about this a little bit. Neil thinks Rico is weak for going after Seth because his dad would never have gone after Seth. His dad would have just like gone right for the person who insulted him. But Wymack has threatened to send them up for a marathon if they don't buy Neil clothes, so they have to buy Neil clothes. Andrew buys Neil a phone. It's a flip phone. Neil has a little flashback to his mom's body burning, and he also like ruined their burner phones, and he hasn't had a phone since. Neil's dead mom's body flashbacks are like an anime scene that gets repeated over and over again. Like the main character's mom's death, and you know you're gonna see it 1,000 times more in the show. That's what Neil's mom's death is in this book. Neil tries to refuse the phone. Nikki tells him he has to hold on to it. Andrew says because people are trying to kill him, he has to hold on to this phone. Neil says he can't, he's very panicked. Nikki takes the phone back. Neil grabs the bags of clothes and Andrew gives him the keys to the car, but holds on to the keys as he hands them to Neil and says, "Hey Neil, honesty looks awful on you." Because like that kind of panic coming through on Neil's face is sort of seen as honesty for Andrew. So Nikki's like just texting Neil's ear off. Neil's like kind of annoyed about this. People are also pissed on the team because they had placed bets on what kind of phone Neil would get, and nobody had like flip phone on their list, so they're pissed at Andrew for picking a flip phone. Okay, then they have a game against USC. Nora gives us nothing. We don't know anything about the game. They win though. Nikki on the bus there though, Nikki texts Neil a smiley face on the bus while also talking to him and says that's how your face should look when you look at your phone. So basically, Nikki has been texting Neil's ear off because he's Nikki, but also to desensitize Neil to the idea of phones and texting. Apparently Andrew asked him to do this. Okay, so moving on to the banquet. Now, if the first book has the talk show, and the Columbia trip. The second book has the banquet and Thanksgiving. These are the two major events that are like, I guess you could also include the Raven's Nest part at the end, but like those are the major events that are going to happen in this book. So it's being held at Blackwell University, and I just have to comment here real quick and say, why so many B schools? We have Belmont, Blackwell, Binghamton. There's others, but it's just like to make the other ones stand out more. I don't know why we have to have so many schools that start with B. So Kevin's not keeping his chill on the way there. Kevin's full on panic mode. Wymack gives him a bottle of alcohol. The Foxes and Ravens are sat across from each other at the same table. Whoever was on the commission, whoever was planning this was like, I live for the drama. Same. Anyway, big yikes. All right, so the Ravens are all dressed and like sitting in the same way because they're creeps and they're cold. Dan and Rico shake hands. Rico is immediately condescending and calls her Hennessy. That'll be explained later. John sits across from Neil. He asks Neil what his name was again and then rattles off 3 names that Neil had previously used on the run. So Neil knows that Rico is like on his case. Barbs are traded all around the table. Neil and Kevin are dying like slow deaths sitting here. Neil hasn't said anything so far, and Rico mentions it, knowing like he was so talkative at the talk show, and then he implies that Neil is a coward, just like his mother. And Neil goes off in my favorite way. Neil says, let me get into character real quick. You know, I get it. Being raised as a superstar must be really, really difficult for you. Always a commodity, never a human being, not a single person in your family thinking you're worth a damn off the court. Yeah, sounds rough. Kevin and I talk about your intricate and endless daddy issues all the time. I know it's not entirely your fault that you're mentally imbalanced and infected with these delusions of grandeur, and I know you're physically incapable of holding a decent conversation with anyone like every other normal human being can, but I don't think any of us should have to put up with this much of your bullshit. Pity only gets you so many concessions, and you used yours up about 6 insults ago. So please, please, just shut the fuck up and leave us alone. And now, if you don't think that was the baddest line in the whole books, I don't know. Take it up with somebody else. Thank you, Nora. Neil pauses and then says, Dan, I said please, I tried to be nice. And Dan's like, Matt, get coached now. John tries to argue with Kevin in French about Neil's behavior, but then Neil cuts in French, which startles John, who didn't know Neil knew French. Wymack comes over and moves them to a different table, but not before John says to Neil, en français, that he will meet Rico that night in private if he doesn't want people to know he's the butcher's son. Now, Kevin has also overheard this. Kevin is not happy about this, let me tell you. Kevin is not happy. Neil tells Kevin he'll tell him everything later. Everyone's like, what the fuck is going on? And kids, it's actually just getting started. This isn't even the end of the banquet. You thought, oh, they're gonna move tables, that's over. Neil did this little speech. No, it's not over. Wymack tells them to go mingle after they eat, and so everybody gets up. The Ravens attempt to corner Kevin on the dance floor. Jan, Matt, and Renee show up for support. The Raven Strikers take digs at Dan for having been a stripper while she was in college, maybe in high school, I don't know. But she had a stripper job where she worked under the name Hennessy, which is why that reference from earlier was insulting. So Dan kicks the guy in the nuts because she's a girl boss. During this altercation, John calls to Neil, who goes to meet Rico in the locker room. Rico calls Neil Nathaniel. Apparently, Rico took Neil's fingerprints from the class that Neil used on the talk show. Rico's 5'5". That's how tall I am. It's not intimidating. Andrew and Aaron are 5'2", Neil's 5'3", and Rico's 5'5". It's just a bunch of short kings. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, Neil learns from Rico that his father was actually a subsidiary of the Moriyamas, and that the money his mother stole actually belongs to the Moriyamas. Matt comes to get Neil. Rico tells him he will have to talk to Kevin about all of this later. The next day, Neil wakes up at Wymac's apartment. Wymac is like, what the fuck? Why do you have a hard-on for antagonizing Rico? Wymac says Andrew says that Neil is a pathological liar. Neil is like, yeah, so. Okay, so I debated coming back and adding this, but I think it's important. During this scene, Neil tells Wymac about how Andrew thinks that Rico caused Seth's death, which yes, he did, but Wymac is like, you shouldn't feel guilty about that, Neil. Murderers choose to be murderers. You being rude on a TV show doesn't make someone kill someone. So basically, Wymac's like, don't listen to Andrew and stop feeling bad for yourself. And yeah. Also, Wymac's basically like, the fact that Seth made it this far was a miracle. So, yeah. Anyway, just felt like I needed to add this because I do reference it later. Wymac takes Neil to the court. Kevin's there. Kevin's pissed that Neil is Nathaniel. Neil tells him his mom is dead and that he had nothing and no one else, and that's why he signed. Kevin tells Neil that his father was Lord Kango's right-hand man. Neil was supposed to be a gift, like Kevin, to Tetsuji to play Exi. But if he wasn't good enough, his dad was going to have to execute him, hence why he and his mother ran. His mother didn't want to take that risk. Neil freaks out. Kevin calls him Nathaniel again, and Neil says, don't call me that. Kevin tells Neil he should run, but Neil says he can't. He's been running too long. And then, very symbolically, Neil has the key to the house in Columbia, Nikki's house, and he traces his finger around the key in his pocket. So it's implied that Neil can't leave because he's finally found a home. Kevin and Neil mourn Neil's future on the court. Neil asks Kevin if he'll still teach him. Kevin says every night, and it's just a bros loving sports moment. Neil asks Kevin what Andrew wants. Kevin says Andrew wants something to live for, and that Kevin's trying to build a life for him to have around him when he goes off his meds. So these three, indescribable issues. Okay, Neil learns more about the Foxes. Because that's a fun thing to put in here in the middle. Dan and Renee had been high school rivals. Girls had to band together to prove their worth on the field. More about Dan's stripper career. Dan wants to be a coach. We get Matt's parents' background. His dad is a plastic surgeon. His mom's a professional boxer. But they're separated because his dad's a cheater. Matt talks about his mom, and Neil thinks of the sound his mother's corpse made when he tried peeling it off the vinyl seat. Neil's favorite color is gray. Neil sees Aaron and Caitlin in the library, being close. Nikki bumps into Neil right after this, and Nikki tells Neil not to mention Aaron and Caitlin to anyone. Neil thought they weren't together. Nikki says not officially. Then he explains that Andrew doesn't want Aaron with Caitlin. Initially, we get this whole backstory on Aaron and Andrew. So, let me throw up some other names on the board. Nikki giving Neil the Aaron and Andrew full backstory. Okay, so Tilda is Andrew and Aaron's mom. Initially, she'd given up both babies, but then she felt kind of guilty about that. So she came back, but only for Aaron. And so Aaron was a symbol of their mother's guilt, hence why she abused him. Aaron started rebelling after learning about Andrew. Andrew met Aaron and decided to start behaving in juvie so that he could go home with them. Then their mom died shortly after Andrew came back, and Aaron blames Andrew for her death, which Andrew did technically cause. Technically was murder. Aaron didn't like his mother, but she was his mother, and he never got to reconcile with her, so that's why he's angry that Andrew killed her, and Andrew doesn't understand why Aaron would be mad when this woman was abusing him. So anyway, Neil thinks Andrew killed their mom to protect Aaron, and that Andrew is mad that Aaron mourned her because she was awful, which is why Andrew doesn't like Caitlin. So Nikki says he stayed. He came back from Germany, remember, German boyfriend. Nikki came back from Germany to try to help these two be a family. And that he hopes Renee makes a move on Andrew sometime soon to distract him from the rest of us. Neil offers Exie as a source of distraction, and Nikki's like, that's not enough. And then talks about setting Neil up with somebody. And then Neil asks Nikki why he doesn't like girls. Nikki says they're soft. Neil takes this figuratively and is like, but Nikki means actually physically, too many curves. And that he likes the hard edges of his boyfriend Eric. So Nikki then tells Neil about his crazy religious parents, being sent off to conversion camp. His life was hell until he was able to go to Germany, met Eric. The rest is history. Nikki asks Neil to reciprocate. Why don't you like girls, Neil? Neil doesn't bite, says it's complicated, won't talk about it. Neil remembers all of this at practice later while staring at Andrew. And thinks about how he wouldn't wish his mess on anyone. He thinks about telling Andrew and Kevin some of his secrets and how Kevin reacted with fear, but that Andrew reacted with telling Neil to stay. This was definitely the last turn he needed his thoughts to take. He dragged his attention back to the task at hand and vowed never to listen to Nikki again. Once you've started thinking about it, Neil, you can't go back. Okay, so apparently their record is 3-1, or 6-1. We know of 3 games that they've played. Breckenridge, which was a loss, Belmont, which is a win, and then USC, which must have also been a win. So there's 4 games that Nora's just declined to tell us about, but apparently they've won all of them. So they're selling overflow tickets for their game against the Ravens for people to sit in the basketball stadium, which I was like, why do they have a separate basketball stadium? Already an Exie stadium is economically not viable, but if it was also the basketball stadium too, then maybe that would make sense, but no. It's not. Also, the sport is played year-round, which most sports are not played year-round. There's a lot of things about Exie that frankly, don't make sense. So everyone's super nervous for this game. Wymack calls them to the stadium early. Neil and Kevin go sit on the Fox's benches in silence. Then there's this little bit of explaining the Ravens. So apparently the Ravens are insane. They're all in the same degree program. And they take their classes in groups of 3 and 4 and aren't allowed to go anywhere by themselves. And they don't live in student dorms, but actually they live underneath the stadium. And when not in class, they're supposed to be in this stadium. They live and breathe Exie. Wymack tells Neil to score at least 5 points or he'll sign him up for a marathon every month until graduation. Wymack tells Andrew to play like he actually wants them to win. Then Neil describes the Ravens fight song as dark and heavy, and that they took their image seriously, and that they had a lot of intensive counseling in their features, which is really kind of comedic coming from a guy who doesn't even believe in counseling, like won't even talk to B, even though he's got serious problems. Okay, so the Ravens score within 2 minutes, which is the fastest anyone scored on Andrew, and it's going like bad. At 3-0, the Ravens switch out one of their strikers and their dealer, and then Matt and Aaron also come on. And Matt and Aaron totally make a difference because Renee doesn't normally play back there, and Nikki is not the best player. Nikki's the weakest link, sorry, other than Neil. Matt checks Rico, Andrew sends the ball to Neil, who outruns his backliner and sends the assist to Kevin, who scores, and Neil gets a tiny piece of approval from Kevin. Matt and Rico get in a fight, Matt gets a yellow, sportsmanship goes out the window, everybody's getting carded left and right. Matt's gotten a yellow in every game that's been described, which makes me wonder whether like there's any like real punishment that comes from getting a yellow. Like apparently if you get a red, you have to sit out the next game. If you get 2 yellows, it's probably like soccer. If you get 2 yellows, I think you're probably out of the game for that day. Anyway, Matt's gotten a yellow in every single game. Neil gets hit and his nose is bleeding, but he keeps playing and then scores on the penalty shot. At the half, the score is 6-3, but it's basically a downward slide. Andrew's losing pace. The game ends at 13-6 Ravens. It's like the most upsetting game. It's the worst point gap they've ever had. And it's the most goals Andrew's given up. And also Kevin and Neil played 2 full halves. And they're up against the best team. So I don't know why we expected it to go differently, but anyway, it's sad. Everyone gathers around Andrew in goal. Rico comes over to be an asshole because that's who he is. We could really do a lot of commentary on like why Rico's an asshole, but I don't want to humanize him. Kevin talks back to Rico, says he's satisfied and that there's more to work with at Palmetto, and then they like promise a rematch at semifinals. Wymack tells them they should be proud. Allison and Dan agreed before they never would have even scored on a team like this. The lineup is now going back to the original. Renee in goal again. Kevin and Neil will have to play full games from now on. All right. Back to daily life. These guys, the monsters, go to get Halloween costumes. Neil thinks they're too old for Halloween. Neil's never even done Halloween, so I don't know why he like isn't jumping on this opportunity, but Neil thinks they're too old for this. Neil gets a text from Dan, which reminds him of his goal of unifying the team. And he says that the monsters should invite these ones, the upperclassmen, to Halloween. And they're like, no, and also I don't think you'd even be able to convince them to come with us. These guys don't think that they'll want to come with them because of what happened to Matt last year. And Neil's like, what happened to Matt? And Andrew's like, ask him if you want to know. Nikki says that he'll pick something up for Neil and then says Neil's going to be a zombie cowboy. They get back to the dorms and this guy's here. You're new. Which is why Dan texted Neil. And Neil was like not urgent at all about this text. He was like, oh, yeah, Dan asked me to unify the team, and not at all caring about the fact that Dan was like, where are you guys? So Higgins and Andrew have a conversation. Higgins says the investigation turned up nothing and that they were looking at the wrong person, but he thinks he has it right this time, but he needs a witness. Andrew asks how many kids his foster mom, Cass, has had since him. Higgins hedges, then he says the name Drake. Andrew asks how many kids again. Higgins says 6. Andrew's like, get in the stairwell now, buddy, we're gonna talk. Everyone's waiting for them to come back because Dan wants to know like what's wrong, because if Andrew's like in trouble with the law, that'll be problematic for them. Andrew doesn't say anything, but says he's not in trouble and that he doesn't need anyone, and then leaves. Dan and Neil go back to Dan's room where Allison, Matt, and Renee are. Neil takes a chance to invite them to a Halloween party. Yay. Dan wants to know how Neil talked them into it. Neil says, I asked, which is a classic Neil lexicon. I asked. Neil says he's not going to ask about the Matt thing, but Matt then offers the story anyway. So Matt had previously been a drug user, had tried staying sober, but then Andrew offered him like speed in Colombia and Matt took it. Apparently it was partly Matt's mom's ideas to get him to kick them for good. I don't really understand this. Like, I guess the idea was to give him like a trip so bad, so awful, that he would never want to do it again. But yeah, so I don't know if I would, as a parent, whether I would condone that, but I guess it worked, because Matt hasn't done drugs since. Anyway, so the upperclassmen do agree to go to Halloween. So they go to Sweetie's as a team and actually get food this time. Aaron is petty, Andrew is petty and rude. Andrew's coming down from his drugs. Kevin offers him more, but Andrew's like, no. Neil asks Kevin why he has Andrew's drugs in French. Kevin says it's because Andrew won't be able to control himself. They talk about Betsy briefly, the therapist. Andrew and Neil go to the bar to get the drinks. Renee and Neil don't drink. Andrew leaves with the tray. Dan asks if it's okay for him to be sober. Nikki says he's not. He's always got something in his system, and that sober him is unmistakable. So basically, this is kind of a moment where we're thinking about the future, where Andrew will be off his drugs, and everyone's kind of afraid of that future, afraid of what non-drug Andrew looks like. They do more dust that they got from Sweetie's, and Dan and Allison also partake. Andrew leaves with the tray again, tells Neil to stop hiding, because this was Neil's idea, so Neil should be like involved with the conversation. And Neil says it's not that easy. Neil explains that he never had friends before. Tragedy. And doesn't want to get connected to these people because he thinks he's going to die soon. And he also doesn't want to put them in danger if he tells them about his past. So Neil asks Andrew what the deal with Renee is. Andrew wants to know why it matters. Neil says he's just trying to understand why they're friends. Andrew says sometimes you're interesting enough to keep around, other times you're so astoundingly stupid, I can barely stand the sight of you. Neil pouts alone for the rest of the night and watches the rest of the team enjoy themselves, content to watch and imagine, but lonely too. If you're lonely, you're not content to watch and imagine. That's all I'm gonna say, Neil. But yeah, the funny thing is, I feel like if you read the conversations between Andrew and Neil, like, it is kind of obvious the way Andrew feels about Neil. Like, it's not, I don't know, it's not as subtle, I think, as maybe like the rest of the team might not see it, but like, I don't know, if you ask me, it seems pretty obvious. Which is why Andrew calls Neil stupid. So then Neil does talk to Renee. Neil finds Renee, and Neil asks Renee why Andrew likes her. Renee says they have a lot in common, and she gives the Renee backstory, finally. She had an abusive mom who had a string of abusive boyfriends. They were involved in gangs. She got caught by the police. Her parents were imprisoned and then killed in jail. Foster care gave her a new start, new faith, and she's trying to be a good person. She says she's a bad person trying to be a good person. Renee's like, why do you care that we're not dating? Neil hedges, but he thinks about how he has no way out and starts thinking about the team and how Andrew might be in a similar situation, like not having anyone he can count on, and Neil's worried about him. Renee says she wouldn't date Andrew, says that she's not Andrew's type. Neil's like not getting it, and Renee's like, Andrew's gay, Neil. Figure something out for once in your life. Neil's like, oh, so Kevin and Andrew, which is like, yeah, a conclusion anyone could jump to. And Andrew and Renee's like, no, Kevin has a girlfriend, which is honestly false. I don't believe this for a second, Nora. Anyway, Kevin apparently has a girlfriend. And only Neil and Renee know about Andrew's sexuality. Neil's surprised that Nikki and Aaron don't know. And Renee says Andrew doesn't want them to know. Neil's like, so why me? And I'm like, why do you think, you dumbass? Anyway, Renee says because Andrew knows he won't use it against him. Which is true. Neil's a nice guy. Just a quick note, like, about the way that Renee and Andrew to some extent does this too. And there's a couple other characters who also do this. She doesn't use contractions. Like, it's always like, it will be da-da-da instead of it'll, or like, he'll, it's like he will. Like, she won't shorten anything, which is kind of a weird speech pattern. And also, like, is weird reading it because it sometimes doesn't flow off as natural. But I think it's supposed to be like these characters just like measure their words really carefully, and so like they're deliberate in the way that they talk. But anyway, it's like weirdly formal. Neil's annoyed that Andrew made him talk to Renee about this. Like, he wishes that like Andrew would have just told him. Renee says that Andrew wants them to be friends because they have stuff in their past in common. I think Andrew also didn't tell Neil because he has a crush on Neil, like, obviously. And he didn't want to tell him about it. Renee and Neil then go buy Andrew and Aaron birthday gifts. Okay. Let me fix Kevin real quick. Matt and Neil are chilling on a Saturday when Nikki comes over. He comes in, wants to talk to Neil. He explains that his mom, who never calls, has called to wish the twins happy birthday and invite them over for Thanksgiving. This offer is contingent on Andrew and Aaron coming to Thanksgiving. Nikki hung up without answering. Neil's like, what does this have to do with me? Nikki says moral support and backup. Basically, Nikki really wants Neil to help him because Nikki misses his mom, and he hasn't talked to her in years because she won't talk to him because he's gay. Terrible, really. So then there's an obligatory Neil missing his mom moment, and Neil's grief for his own mother compels him to aid Nikki. So he goes to their dorm room and leaves Nikki in his room. I just talked about the way Renee talks, but let me talk about the way Andrew talks. It's like a fucking psycho. He talks his speech is so weird. Every line is like really like, you're just like blown away by the literature of these lines. And it's like, everything he sees is like ripped from a teen's screenplay about the Joker. That's how Andrew talks. So it's like a literature, but derogatory. I don't know how to explain it. It's just like, it's good, but it's also like kind of cringe sometimes. Anyway, Neil says that Nikki's mother called and invited them to Thanksgiving. Andrew says no right off the bat. Neil asks why. Andrew says he isn't friends with Nikki's dad. Neil says they aren't friends either, but they still do things together. Andrew talks a bit about his past, how his last foster family wanted to adopt him, and how he went to juvie because he didn't want to be adopted. He also grabs Neil by the neck during this whole conversation and taps his thumbs like along Neil's collarbone. Get a room, is all I have to say. Nikki's dad was on team get Andrew adopted, but Andrew told him a secret to try to get him to change his mind. But Luther didn't believe Andrew about what he told him, which hurt Andrew. So he doesn't want to give Luther a second chance. Neil knows he's losing Andrew's on this, so he offers to go with them. Andrew's like, you wouldn't. And Neil doubles down and says, bring Kevin too. And maybe it'll go so bad. Neil basically implies that maybe it'll go so bad, Nikki will finally give up on his family. And so Andrew agrees to go, but that it can't be on actual Thanksgiving. just the tension. I recommend these books if you just want to go through and read every Neil Andrew conversation. You'll be in for like the ride of your life. It's so good. Anyway, Neil goes back to his room. He gives Nikki these conditions, and Nikki is shocked that Neil even got anywhere. He asks him how he did it. Neil says, I asked. Matt also is like, why are you so special? Neil says Andrew thinks it's funny to say yes to him. Nikki's mom agrees to the conditions, and Neil is satisfied, but he's also worried. He says he's only going to watch Andrew and prevent him from doing anything bad, but he also means to protect, worry over, and stare at Andrew the whole time. So now we've got to get some more names up on the board. All right, Thanksgiving. Yikes. Yikes is really all I have to say about Thanksgiving, and it's only going to get more yikes. Anyway, hey, remember XC? So yeah, back to XC. It feels like we've been talking about like everyone's personal life so much. So like back to XC. Kevin was complaining about the trip to Thanksgiving, or like not Thanksgiving, anti-Thanksgiving. But then he realized they could go XC gear shopping at this store called Excites in Columbia. Yay! So he wants to switch Neil to a heavy racket, which strikers rarely use because they're heavy. He wants Neil to have more power behind his shots. Neil is hitting accurate now, but he needs more power, so he needs a heavier racket according to Kevin. So Nora spells story the British way, and it pisses me off. With an E. That's with an E. I'll put it on the board. Kevin is immediately intercepted by the manager of the store because remember, Kevin is a celebrity in the XC world. Andrew and Neil go to look at rackets. They're talking about what XC means to them and vaguely about the future and also about Kevin, sort of. And Neil accuses Andrew of being self-destructive. Andrew tells Neil that he's more trouble than he's worth. Andrew says he's spoken with B about Neil, which upsets Neil. Neil says he's not a lost cause. Andrew puts his hand over Neil's mouth to shut him up. So many touches. Between those two, so many touches. Anyway, it's like, are they gonna kiss? But no, obviously that doesn't happen. Andrew removes his hand, leaving just the memory of his heartbeat against Neil's mouth. So yeah, this like moment could totally have gone like, if they were normal people, it would have gone one way, but it goes unresolved because they're both so emotionally traumatized that they can't deal with it, and they're left both sort of like worrying and also hating each other, because in Neil's case, he doesn't understand why he cares about Andrew, and in Andrew's case, he denies himself wanting Neil because he doesn't think he can have that. Andrew leaves Neil, and then Kevin shows up and takes him to the practice court to try out the rackets, and then they buy the 3 rackets, and the cost is insane, and it's like, why is this sport so expensive? Yet all of these like burnouts are playing it on the Fox's team, and it's like, where'd they get the money? That's one of the things in this book. It's like, where'd they get the money? They're all sort of kind of rich, actually. Okay. So now it's finally time to go to Nikki's parents' house, and I just want to reiterate all of those trigger warnings that I put up at the beginning. They come into play heavily in the next few chapters, the next scenes especially. I am not going to talk about any of this in detail. But yeah, the way I am gonna present the Thanksgiving bit though is as a crime does take place. I am going to present this as a crime scene overview, because I think it's important to know where, especially in this scene, where everyone is. So we're gonna go do that. To talk about Thanksgiving, I have a little floor plan of the house with our full cast that I will put into place as needed. So we have Nikki's parents, Maria and Luther. And then we have Andrew, Aaron, Nikki, Neil, who is holding they got a practice racket, and Neil is holding that racket because on the way in to the house, Andrew threatened to beat Luther's car with the racket, and so Nikki was like, Neil, make him stop that. And so Neil has his racket. Now, why he doesn't put it back in the car, I don't know. I mean, there's literally no reason for him to bring it in, but it's important for the plot that it is brought in. So, yes, Neil brings it in. It's like super awkward. Neil leaves his racket by the stairs. It's super awkward because obviously Maria and Luther are like Bible thumping homophobic parents, so it's not fun. it's not fun. So they go out to the back patio to eat. Remember, it's South Carolina, so it's not that cold. So they go out to eat, and they say grace, which Neil's like not. Neil's not into religion. Nikki and his parents argue about his sexuality. They have not budged, still absolutely in the hellfire camp. Nikki's like, well, why am I here then if you guys aren't gonna say anything? Like, if you're not gonna try to repair this relationship, then what's the point? Andrew wants to know where, like, they say they want to repair the family, and Andrew wants to know where they're gonna start, if not with tolerance, and Luther says with reparations. So they all start eating. Then, at some point during this meal, Luther and Andrew go back inside and have an argument really loudly in the kitchen. So Neil's trying to like hear this conversation but can't. He can only tell that it's loud, and then it's bad. So then eventually Luther goes back outside. But Andrew doesn't come back. Maria goes inside to check on the pie, comes back out. Nikki tells Neil to check on that Andrew isn't breaking anything. Nikki says this to Neil in German, and Maria says, talk in a language we all can understand, Nikki. Or like, she calls him Nicholas, but I'm not going to. And Neil says to Nikki in English, I'll find Andrew. And Maria says, oh no, he's just speaking with Drake. Neil's like, hold up, Drake? Maria says that this get-together was actually Drake's idea. Neil says, as in Drake Spears, and they're like, yeah. And so Neil's not pleased with that. So Neil grabs Aaron, and they both go inside. And then Neil grabs his racket, and he and Aaron both go upstairs. Accidentally put Neil in the closet there for a second. Okay. So Neil is worried about Andrew. He grabs Aaron, runs upstairs. There's only one door that is fully closed upstairs, so Neil and Aaron break that door down. I'll be quick here, but Andrew, basically they see Drake sexually assaulting Andrew, and both Neil and Aaron go to attack Drake. Aaron gets there first, using Neil's new practice racket to hit Drake, who collapses and is like bleeding on the floor. He dies. Aaron murders him. Kevin comes upstairs looking for them. Neil quickly tries to cover Andrew up with like a bed sheet and sends Kevin away. Kevin leaves ostensibly to go get like police or whatnot. Neil tries to ask Andrew if he's okay, wrapping him in the bed sheet. Aaron's super freaked out. Luther shows up upstairs. Andrew accuses him of not believing him, and this is the result of that disbelief. He's angry with Luther for allowing more children to be in the Spears foster family. Aaron yells Luther out of the room. Neil just keeps saying Andrew's name, trying to get through to him. Andrew takes his armbands off, and Nikki is also in the room at some point here too. Anyway, but both Nikki and Aaron are kind of shocked there's a lot of non-responsiveness going on in the room. Andrew takes his armbands off, and Neil is able to tell his forearms are scarred from like self-harm. Neil touches Andrew's wrist. Andrew pulls away. Yeah, Neil is like pushing so much empathy into this scene. It's very intense. It's also one of the few times that Neil it's one of the first times that Neil sort of reaches out and touches Andrew instead of the other way around. Not necessarily a good thing in terms of how Andrew will want their relationship to go, but like it is interesting. Yeah, Neil is just deeply guilty about the fact that he brought Andrew here, and deeply upset that this is Andrew's past. Yeah. It's one of the more horrible scenes, I think, in the book. Yeah. Alright. Back to reality. Thanksgiving aftermath. Now that we are all down in this dark headspace, let's think about the aftermath. So Neil triages their response. He sends Nikki and Kevin to go to the police station to wait for Aaron. Neil goes to see Andrew. Kevin's called Wymack. Wymack shows up and meets Neil at the hospital for Andrew. Neil says he's fine to Wymack several times. Neil won't tell Wymack what happened, but tells him to call the Oakland Police Department and give them the details that Drake is the suspect that they're looking for, to call Higgins and tell them that Drake is the suspect that they're looking for. Wymack drives Neil and Andrew back to the Columbia house, Nikki's Columbia house. Betsy is there waiting for them. Andrew tells Neil to talk to her. Neil doesn't want to. Andrew applies guilt because he knows that Neil feels guilty that he compelled Andrew to go to this Thanksgiving thing when he knew that Luther hadn't believed Andrew about something, which that something was the Drake thing. And even though Neil didn't know that Drake would be there, he did kind of deliver him to that. So Neil feels bad. But then Neil applies guilt right back. He asks Andrew why he didn't tell Higgins that they were looking for Drake because more children were hurt because he didn't, even if Andrew didn't know that there were more children. Andrew wraps his fingers around Neil's throat. Andrew, as this conversation continues, Andrew begins to suffocate Neil before relenting and then pulling Neil to him. He has his mouth near Neil's ear as he explains more about his history and why he's done what he's done to protect Aaron and and protect his own psyche, which is why he doesn't feel anything anymore. Basically, Andrew's trauma response has been to completely block all emotion, which, I mean, valid. This makes Neil really upset. Neil is really sad that Andrew has been brought so low as to be forced to not care for anything anymore. He tries to hold on to Andrew, but is forced to let go as Andrew tells him he feels nothing. It really hurts. Andrew goes inside. Wymack asks Neil to come inside, but Neil doesn't, saying, "I'm fine," and takes off running. This would be funny that Neil does two classic Neil things, but it's too sad to be funny, so. Neil comes back, falls asleep on the couch. He has a conversation in the morning with Wymack. He tells Wymack he's fine, and Wymack says, "Between you and me, Neil, I don't think you've ever been fine." Also true. Andrew makes Neil go with B to get groceries and the car and Andrew's knives back. Neil and B talk in the car, rehashing the event, Neil avoiding thinking of any of them as his friends or telling B about anything about himself. He wants his racket back, saying it didn't kill anyone important. Neil tries to cope with the tragedy of Andrew's self-harm as well. Neil picks up Andrew's knives and the car from the house. He's never driven alone before. It's always been with his mom. So, there's obligatory, thinking about his mom again. When they get back, the lawyers are there. Wymack sends Neil to check on Nikki and Kevin. It seems like almost, at this point, Neil is basically team staff for Wymack at this point. Neil triaged their response. Neil was like, you go here, you go there. And then Neil was sent to go get the car and the groceries. Neil is basically an assistant coach to Wymack at this point. But Neil hears Wymack and Abby and B arguing. B wants to put Andrew in rehab immediately and get him off his meds. So Neil comes back in and says, do it, because he knows how cruel it is to keep Andrew high all the time. It's not Neil's decision, but okay, I guess he can offer his support, that's fine. Neil goes to Nikki's room. Nikki's beating himself up about having brought Andrew to Drake. Neil basically parrots what Wymack told him about Neil feeling guilty about Seth. And Neil and Kevin leave Nikki so he can have space to call Eric and talk to Eric about it. Kevin goes with Neil to the kitchen. Neil thinks about how he hopes somebody called the registrar to explain their absence, which is such an anxiety brain thing. You can tell your teachers later what happened. It's not like you're gonna get flunked out immediately for missing one class, Neil. Also, why do you care? Why do you care? You don't think you're even going to be going here in a year. Kevin wonders how Neil knew when no one else did. Neil knew because he listens, Kevin. He listens. He pays attention to things other than himself and Exie. Andrew comes into the kitchen and informs Kevin in the most theatrical way that he's being shipped off to rehab. Andrew asks who's going to watch Kevin. Neil says he will. Andrew shoves Neil. Neil grabs Andrew's arms when he tries to shove him again and pulls Andrew to him. They start speaking in German. Neil says he's trying to take responsibility. He asks Andrew to trust him, and Andrew wants to know why he should. Neil tells him if he can't trust Neil, he can trust him as Abram, which is Neil's real middle name. Neil pulls Andrew's hands under the hem of his shirt so that Andrew can feel the scars on his abdomen. Neil says he'll tell Andrew about his scars, if they make it through this. Andrew pulls away and turns back to everyone else and agrees to Neil protecting Kevin in English. And then Andrew leaves to check with Nikki. Wymack sees the lawyers out, and then he asks Neil, when did that happen? Referring to Andrew and Neil. And Neil's when did what happen? And Wymack's you're an idiot. It's so funny. It's so funny the way that they're being so obvious. Okay, so Andrew then leaves with Betsy. Wymack tells Neil he's available to talk if he ever needs it. And Neil's passes on that. Neil cooks everybody breakfast because he's the fourth staff member of this team. Aaron comes back. Neil talks to him and asks if he feels bad for making Andrew lose his family. Aaron's like, that guy wasn't his family. And Neil means Cass, Drake's parent, because like Andrew was willing to suffer for the sake of like Cass. Now Cass will probably never talk to Andrew again. Aaron says he doesn't care if Andrew never talks to Aaron again because he'd do it again. And Neil says, good, now you understand why Andrew killed your mother. And Aaron is shocked to hear that Neil thinks that's why Andrew did it. Neil tells him he lied about Andrew being mad at him for killing Drake. He said that because he needed Aaron to understand why Andrew would have killed his mother. Neil's trying to lay down the groundwork for preparing this relationship. Neil drives them back because he's now a trusted driver of Andrew's car. When they get back to the dorm, Caitlin and the upperclassmen are there waiting for Aaron. There's a cinematic like running embrace scene for the straights between Caitlin and Aaron. Matt's mom has posted Aaron's bail. Matt's mom does continue to be an icon. So Dan tries to galvanize the team into unity, but Aaron leaves immediately with Caitlin. Kevin's mad they took Andrew because they'll forfeit for the year if the ERC decides that they don't have a full roster. It's always about XC with Kevin and never about the way people are affected. Some serious work needs to be done there. Neil tells Kevin off, but if he'd seen what Neil saw, he'd agree that this was best for Andrew too. Honestly, Neil shines in this moment, showing how emotionally stunted and selfish Kevin's reaction is. Renee asks if he's okay, and Neil says, I'm fine, obviously. At practice the next day, Wymack lets them know that he spoke with the Class 1 coaches and that they will give them unanimous support to the ERC, the XC Rules and Regulations Committee, to let the Foxes continue their season, and the ERC accepts. So they will be allowed to finish the year. The upperclassmen notice that Neil is driving Andrew's car and are surprised that Andrew gave Neil the key. Neil asks Matt to teach him how to fight, which is like, sure, Neil. Boxing will save you from the mafia that's after the Yakuza that's after you and Kevin. They play a game, it gets a one-sentence mention. They win, but it's like harder because Neil has that new racket and Andrew's not there. Their season is 11-2. They have losses to Breckenridge and Edgar Allen. Dan and Matt invite the Monsters to hang with them on Friday. They invite the Vixens too. Aaron doesn't want to, but Nikki convinces him. Aaron says Nikki will have to explain their new team unity to Andrew when he gets back, and Nikki passes that off to Neil, calling him a real friend. And Neil says, are we friends? And Nikki is like briefly saddened by this, as we all are, and then smiles and tells Neil that, yeah, of course they're friends. And then Neil takes like a sad, mopey shower while wondering what friends mean and how even if he has them, he's still watched by the mafia. So it's like, Nora will like give you an inch and then take 26 miles back from you, and it's just sad. Then they have like a real Thanksgiving at Abby's. Neil admits to never having had Thanksgiving, and Nikki gets sentimental. And it's like, you know, Nikki is kind of annoying, but he's a real one. He's been there for Neil like a lot, just like Matt has. Like Matt and Nikki are both there for Neil a lot of the time and have like these really kind of interesting conversations with Neil that a lot of the rest of the team just doesn't have with him. Like I would say Neil, Renee, and Matt have these conversations with, or Nikki, Matt, and Renee have these conversations with Neil that are really kind of good for Neil. And I mean, obviously they love him. This team loves him. The one person who kind of annoys me a little bit is Allison. Allison just, like, I do like her, but sometimes she girl bosses too hard. They go out to dinner with the Vixens. One of them, Marissa, tries to hit on Neil and fails miserably. She offers to give Neil her number, and Neil says, what for? And Neil says, I wouldn't call you. I socialize with the foxes or not at all. And Nikki's like, that's super harsh. And Renee offers to go with Neil to the Christmas banquet. And then Matt offers to bring Neil home with him for Christmas break. So it looks like everything's going wonderfully. But of course, it can't stay that way. The Christmas banquet. Okay, Neil and Matt are on protect Kevin duty. Palmetto is second in the ranking of teams. They have a 12-2 record. They are technically, Breckenridge also has a 12-2 record, but Palmetto has scored more goals overall, so they have a higher ranking in the standings. Rico comes to talk to Neil, and there's like so many good barbs between them. Neil says, you think I'm afraid of your knife, I'm the butcher's son. And then he tells Rico that, about the Moriyamas. He says, you're not a part of that family, remember? You're the cast off. So basically, Rico is like, well, Kevin, you didn't tell him to tone it down. And then Rico sends Kevin and John off, and Rico tells Neil he'll spend the winter break at Evermore, or something might happen to Andrew in rehab, implying he's bought off one of Andrew's doctors. He also lets Neil know that he's the one who sent Drake to Andrew. Neil literally tries to kill Rico after he says this, but they're pulled off of one another. After the fight is broken up, the Foxes huddle on one side, and Neil tells them about how Rico set Andrew up with Drake. And he says they have to break Rico with Exy, and he tells them that they can't lose a game next spring. It's a very motivating coach kind of speech, but it's coming from Neil. And then he asks Kevin in French if he has his ticket. Kevin tells him not to go to Evermore, and Neil says he has no choice because Neil obviously has to protect his boy Andrew. So Neil fakes a call in front of Nikki to give himself an alibi for why he can't go with them to Matt's for break. Basically, he has this phone call where he acts like his parents are calling him to let him know that his uncle is coming for break, and so Neil will go home to see his uncle. He has that this phone call in front of Nikki, and Nikki believes it. Neil gets a ride from Matt to the airport. John picks him up from the flight and tells him he shouldn't have come. Rico is making Neil stay in Kevin's old bed, which is Rico and Kevin shared a room, so he's rooming with Rico. Rico hasn't gotten rid of any of Kevin's stuff, all of Kevin's stuff is still on the walls, so that's fun. Rico's had Neil an entire set of gear made, all of this with Neil's name on it. Neil's like, why'd you do this? And John says, because you're transferring next summer. And Neil's like, no, I'm not. And John says, try not to get us both killed, because apparently the Ravens function on a pair system, so successes and failures are shared by the pair. So anything that Neil does wrong, John will also be punished for. John then reveals that Wymack is Kevin's dad. Shocking. And that Wymack doesn't know. Also shocking. So Tetsuji and Rico come into the room. Tetsuji tells Neil to kneel. Neil says, make me, because he's a fool. Tetsuji beats him with a cane. John is there for Neil, but it's truly an awful time. He tells Neil he should have run. Neil pulls a Bane from Batman and says, I grew up on pain, 2 weeks of this won't mean a thing. John says it's 3 because they're on Ravens time, which means they run on 16-hour days, which is don't ask. It's so stupid. I can't even talk about it. It's so stupid. And then, Rico literally carves Neil up with a knife for fun the whole two weeks or 3 weeks or however you want to think about it. Which is where I have to make a comment about the level of gratuitous violence in these books. Because I think at some point it stops being not that, I mean, obviously there's some level of interest in like it being entertaining and like some of the violence, but I feel like it goes a little too far. It stops being like drama and it starts just being painful to read. And it's sort of the way the books are written too, is sort of kind of this torturous like thing where it'll be, you know, kind of these just snippets of like daily life for a long time. You'll have kind of these nothing's happening conversations where you learn more about the other characters, or you think about Neil's academics, and it's just like you're building tension for the next kind of horrible scene that's going to happen, for the next like awful assault or like violence that'll occur. So it's they kind of give you this feeling like a horror movie almost, where you're continually building up anticipation for the next really bad thing that's going to happen. So I do kind of appreciate that Nora gives us like just that Rico is abusing Neil, but we don't get like a whole 2 weeks of it. We just get that first day, and then Neil's kind of like blacks out the rest of it, which is sad in its own way, but at least we didn't have to read it. So Neil wakes up in the South Carolina airport kind of in a daze, having like sort of forgotten everything that's happened to him in the past 2 weeks. He calls Wymack from the airport. Wymack asks if Neil's all right, and Neil says no. Growth. And asks Wymack to pick him up. Neil's hair is back to its normal color, auburn, kind of an auburn orange, and he doesn't have his contacts in, so it's blue-eyed, auburn-haired orange Neil at this point. And then Neil has a 4 tattooed on his face. Remember the tattoos, so Neil is now 4th in Rico's perfect court ranking. Neil tries to get a knife in Wymack's apartment to carve the tattoo off, but Wymack stops him. Neil, again, his memory is really kind of messed up because of the trauma. Wymack tries to get Neil to talk, but Neil just wants to know that Andrew is okay. Because remember, Rico had bought off one of those doctors. Wymack cleans Neil's wounds, which is either a lot of growth from Neil or a lot of exhaustion on letting Wymack touch him and see his scars. And I'm really on the exhaustion side. I don't know that Neil's really had a lot of growth from this. It feels like he's just so exhausted from what's happened to him over the past two weeks that he lets Wymack take care of him. He tells Wymack he'll tell him like his whole story after they beat the Ravens. Neil texts the team Happy New Year, and they all text him back right away in this kind of final moment that sort of tries to like combat the kind of awfulness of the Ravens with this kind of joyful triumph and determination of Neil's connection with his team and his like vengeance that he's promised against the Ravens on the court. And that's how the second book ends. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. I will be back probably pretty shortly with the third book. But yeah, I thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. And like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. You know, I get it. Being raised as a superstar must be really, really difficult for you. Always a commodity, never a human being, not a person. Let's start over.